Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America together. Now, here's Jeff.
It is hour 3 of the Jeff Santos Show. Welcome to it, folks. We are anticipating a hurricane. Just get a little message in the computer of the storm surge here in the south coast of Massachusetts. Folks, it's serious stuff, so we're going to take that serious. Again, we may or may not be able to broadcast on Monday if the hurricane is scheduled to landfall about, they're saying 8 or 9 a.m. on Sunday. We'll see. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that we can survive this and broadcast as we normally do on Mondays with our great list of guests. We'll be talking a little bit differently in this hour. Our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield will be with us in a matter of seconds, and Joe Sandberg, who was stuck in a meeting and Mark was gracious enough to switch positions with him, will be with us at 5:30 Eastern, 2:30 Pacific time. And we will play it that way, folks, in this hour. Phone number to join is 772-223-2362. Those of you who wanted to speak with Joe, just hanging in there with us. And obviously you can talk to Mark, too, who's not only a great friend of the program and yours truly, but is a fantastic journalist for Democracy Watch News, which is going to be merging soon, and Mark will give you that news in the new organization. And of course, he is a great activist and a great musician. One of these days, yours truly will get out there to Seattle and see him perform live with his great band. It's great to have our good friend, the Renaissance man of the Jeff Santos Show, Mark Taylor-Canfield, joins us on the line from Seattle, WA. And how hot is it? How is it going, Mr. Mark Taylor-Canfield?
In the house.
Hey!
It is hot in Seattle, but it's not.
You are in the house for sure.
My guitar. We got the high guitar.
Your guitar, that's for sure, man. There you go.
It's actually kind of cool and overcast in Seattle. Yes, please tell people that. And yeah, you know, what is it? The old joke that my girlfriend said, chilly today, hot tamale kind of thing. That's what's going on here. So we've had some chill weather, which is good because we've had, you know, some forest fire activity. And also, I'm actually glad to see cloudy skies in Seattle. You know, that Perry Como song maybe should be changed to "The cloudiest skies you've ever seen are in Seattle," because that's the way it's looking right now. And I'm happy about that. So I'm not complaining. Life's good.
You're not going to be making a cover of that, are you, Mark? Perry Como cover?
I hope not. Maybe, you know, in the middle of the night in the studio.
I hope not, too.
Sometimes things happen in the studio that you don't expect, like when you did that song about the Seahawks called Legion of Boom, and it was just kind of like a party we were having in the studio, and somebody said, "Hey, why don't you rap about the Seahawks?" Suddenly, it became like the most downloaded song I've ever done, and the Seahawks were thanking us personally for it or whatever. So you never know what could happen in the middle of the night in a studio, and that's where I'm at right now, Jeff. I am actually in the middle of building a new studio. We left the famous off-ramp, which is now called El Corazon, because that venerable old building is going to be torn down. Luckily, the El Corazon Rock Club it has been there for years now does have a new place to go, so they're not going out of business. It looks like the owner of the building, who is a friend of mine, actually, his name is Pete Zykov, millionaire real estate investor who looks like a hippie and, you know, is in a band himself. He actually bought Jimi Hendrix's house and spent, I think, $1.8 million.
Well, you should go play for him then, man. I mean, you got that guitar working for you. You should play a little Hendrix, and maybe he gives you a few of those millions. Just saying, you know, whatever. Hey, before we get into the music stuff, which I want to get into before we go, I want to ask you a little bit about how the reaction is with Joe Biden amongst progressives on both the concerns of unemployment, the eviction issue of a couple of weeks ago with Cori Bush, and of course now the Afghanistan issue. You know, what we're feeling here is that all of the Washington, D.C. media, and of course that's mainstream national media that has their counterparts in New York, that are basically everything that is about, Joe Biden is about what's happening in Afghanistan, which has been problematic. It's not it's not the end of the world, but he hasn't handled it very well. Defensiveness in the interview with Stephanopoulos. Secondly, he's sort of, not being able to sort of really say the truth of making sure that everybody comes out. He's better today than he was last time. What say you? What have you been hearing on the streets of Seattle about how Mr. Biden is handling this? Because the more time you watch mainstream TV, CNN, MSNBC, BBC, Fox, if you call that mainstream, it's wacko right. They are basically criticizing Biden, whether it's a lighter criticism on the MSNBCs of the world, or whether it's he's a criminal and he's the worst guy in the world, and Joe Biden from the Fox world. That's that story. What are you hearing there in Seattle?
Well, there are several different ways to look at this. Number one, we should remember that the Iraq War itself was an illegal war based on lies. And so the American people were duped. And I was able to interview Lieutenant Aaron Watada, who was an officer who refused to take his troops into Iraq. And he ended up being court-martialed, and some of us were, being subpoenaed, who had interviewed him, subpoenaed by the Pentagon, which was crazy. Of course, none of the reporters would answer the subpoena, so they were eventually dropped. But, so Afghanistan is another place where, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people have died over the years of our intervention and then the intervention by the Soviet Union. So the long history, even great empire builders and conquerors in the past had a really hard time with Afghanistan. So no surprise that it was not a successful intervention. This U.S. foreign policy, which involves this huge military empire, has many levels of corruption, and we have the military-industrial complex that General Eisenhower, who became president, warned us about, and its effects on democracy. I think, I had some teachers in high school who were Vietnam War vets who told me all about that war and what a terrible shame that was. And I think we just have experienced it again. It seems like we don't learn our lesson when it comes to these occupations and interventions. And I just, retweeted my Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal's statement about how difficult it is, and I agreed with her, how difficult it is to sustain a global military empire while, just taking care of the basic essential needs of your own domestic population.
Exactly, which is why I think Biden should be able to sort of pivot from this and say, look, we're doing all we can. We will not allow any American to be left behind. We will not allow anybody who helped us to be left behind. You can guarantee me that. But I am moving forward with the $3 trillion. I am moving forward with the infrastructure bill, and I'm definitely moving forward with voting rights, which will basically give the opportunity for America not to live in a fascist state, which is probably what's going to end up happening in Afghanistan anyways, and going to live in a country that is what is supposed to be a true blue democracy. And that's what we have to do in this country. He has to be able to do that, because otherwise he's going to lose the country. We're going to end up in a Jimmy Carter malaise again, which is not a good place for America to be in.
You just took the words right out of my mouth, Jeff. I was thinking about the whole Jimmy Carter situation, and I had mentioned on your program about the Olympics and how he boycotted the Olympics. And how the right used that against him, but he did that partly because he had been accused of being weak on communism, and then you had Obama, who is, stepping up these wars, and using the drone strikes and things, who was also being criticized for being, soft on the war on terror or whatever. So, Unfortunately, and we see this, historians like Harvey Kay could explain this to you, I'm sure, quite in depth, but we see this at Democracy Watch News when you do analysis of history and what's been going on this planet for a long time. Oftentimes, domestic politics become the reason for foreign interventions and foreign wars, and that's really a tragedy because of the rivalry between the Republicans and the Democrats in the United States. We have to have another war to prove to one side that they're patriotic and tough, have a tough stance on the war on terror. I mean, it's really sad that domestic policy becomes international foreign policy, and it usually results in some kind of tragedy like we've witnessed. I'm worried, like you, that Biden will be painted with this malaise kind of thing that they used against Carter, trying to say that he's a weak leader or whatever. It's a very vulnerable point for him, and it's also a major distraction from these domestic policies and domestic issues that we're dealing with. And the right, of course, is always really good at that, distracting everybody from the real issues in the country and coming up with whether it's the 3Gs or whatever. There's some reason, to mobilize and isolate and alienate people and divide people. They seem to be really good at that. So here you have another chance for the right to castigate the president and accuse him of being a weak, ineffectual leader because of what's happening in Afghanistan. And it's sad. It's an albatross around the neck of the United States. It has been ever since those wars of intervention and occupation began, and it's still happening today.
No doubt. Talking with our great friend Mark Taylor-Canfield. We'll be talking with Joe Sandberg coming up at the bottom of the hour as we did a little flip today, and we appreciate Mark being able to do that. The other piece of the puzzle, Mark, is what happened with the eviction situation. That was dragged out. Thankfully, Cori Bush saved the day. But you now have a lot of unemployment issues, that running out in the next couple of months. These are things that Joe Biden has to secure. He basically has to rally the Democratic Party to be the party of the underdog, the party of the working class. And if he doesn't do that, and he just sort of lets somebody else take the lead, Republicans will steal the issue, and they will make one of the massive mistakes that the Democratic Party has ever done, and I think potentially could kill it as we know it today. Because if you don't get voting rights done, you're going to lose 2022. You're going to put yourself in a precarious position for 2024, and that could be the ball game right there. As opposed to maybe being the majority party if you do the right thing by initiating things like getting people unemployment, getting people health care, getting people the minimum wage increase, getting people education, getting the environment to be a priority and create jobs at the same time. I mean, these are all things that can be done, and the American people are all in favor of it.
I'm thinking that three things. One, it's not just the right wing in the United States that's attacking Biden, because Sky News, the Rupert Murdoch types in Australia are doing the same thing. So, right-wing media, wherever it pops up its ugly head. And then you have this other attitude that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it involves the fact that, we've had a moratorium on evictions. We've had, in Seattle as well, locally and nationally, we've had proposals to forgive student debt. We've had the unemployment extensions, which now Biden has failed to extend. And it brings me back to this one thought and this one idea, and some of it comes from having spent some time in Europe, where you start thinking about wealth in different terms. Wealth is relative. Are you a wealthy person if your health care insurance could bankrupt you? Are you a wealthy person if you don't have access to universal cheap health care, if you don't have access to free education? All of those things have a cost. In the cost analysis, they go on the negative side of the ledger. And if you have a society where people maybe don't have billions in the bank, or can't own economic markets and monopolize entire markets with their economic empire, then you have a situation where maybe people have free health care, maybe they have free education, maybe there's some kind of rent control, maybe they actually have access to affordable housing and real estate in where they live. Now suddenly, maybe your income isn't in the billions, but I'm telling you, you're a wealthy person. Because anybody, and I'm talking about countries like Denmark and other countries where these things do happen, you have a much, much higher standard of living for the average person. So it's a way of dealing with the houselessness and the poverty and the unemployment that we're experiencing right now. I think guaranteed basic income is an excellent idea and could also eliminate a lot of poverty. I think my congresswoman and friend Camilla Jayapal is out there talking about these same kinds of ideas. And I just look at some of the Western democracies in Europe, call them, democratic socialists, democracies or republics or whatever you want to call them. But what they are is they're highly organized. Basic essential needs are taken care of, and therefore the standard of living is much higher. They have a lower infant mortality rate, a better healthcare system, a better education system. And if we want to be on the cutting edge and leaders in the world, whether it be technologically or culturally, we need to enter the 21st century. And I keep saying that. When is the United States going to finally enter the 21st century and go?
You can't be, Mark, a country that is number one in economics, number one in the most money per the 1%, and the biggest military power, and yet people are 35th in distribution of health care and 28th in education, and all of these numbers where you're behind Cuba in some cases, and you can't be considered a country. And if you look at the fact that people who are moving from this country, they are not moving from Europe. They are not moving from Australia. They are moving from the poor countries of Central America, which the United States has been involved in basically destroying the economies and allowing dictators, corrupt dictators, to stop any kind of democracy from spreading in places like Honduras and El Salvador and these Central American countries, and they're the ones that are coming north. They've been in Mexico as well, and this has to stop. I mean, it really does. I mean, and I just hope that we can save it in time, and that's why I keep saying to my audience that we can't just throw darts at Joe Biden. If we can't constructively criticize him to change for the betterment of the party and the betterment of the country, then we've lost him, and then we've lost the country, because he's the only one left. I mean, Bernie Sanders is not, going to be running, in the next year or so. He can't do that. There's not an election that time. So Biden is the guy, and you need to make him a better guy, a better president. Otherwise, we're screwed. I don't know how else to say it.
Jeff, kudos to you and your guests for even bringing up some of these issues, because the corporate controlled media in the United States is so, even in MSNBC, is so poorly edited and produced in my way of thinking in terms of bringing people the real statistics and the real news. Those statistics that you just quoted are never, ever, ever broadcast on CNN. It's never a headline news story. Just like the fact that we're 46th in the world in terms of press freedom. That's never bandied about on your local news, radio, television broadcasts. I mean, it's not going to happen. The networks don't talk about this stuff. So thank God, best talk show in the United States, you have a platform where people can actually do that. And we can listen to these, geniuses like Harvey K, because I'm telling you, I'm educated every time I listen to your program. And what you were just saying is the whole reason why I think, Democracy Watch News exists, and probably, Amy Goodman and her program Democracy Now, because people are really hungry for the truth. And what you were saying is right on. And I really think that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's how we got Trump, okay? I saw my friends who were so anti-Hillary that they decided to support this right-wing fascist. Give me a... I'm not going to use the word.
I know. There's an F there. I know you don't want to say it either.
Yeah. So we run that, progressives, run that danger of doing the same thing. We have to be careful. There's realpolitik, which is what the French would call it, and all diplomats understand this, that there's the ideals and the things that we're working for and the goals that we have to always keep in mind and never back down on. I just saw a courageous story, a film about a French resistance leader, and he fought against his own party, because of his ideals. And I think that happens sometimes too, where you have to go head to head with your own party leadership. But at the same time, you have to be smart enough to realize that there is an extreme position that can give an advantage to your opponent, and you have to be very careful when you find yourself in that situation, because it can backfire on you. So I think it's very clear that, yes, we need to be critical of the Democrats. We should probably not give the right wing and the Republicans a leg up and a leg to stand on in terms of taking power, because it would be much worse.
No doubt. We're talking with our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield. In the final couple of minutes here, we want to get into a little bit of an arena name change, which is crazy in the sense that, again, it took the NHL to come into Seattle to do this. It's going to be called Climate Pledge Arena, where Key Arena used to be, or still is in the physical place. But that's a great idea. I don't know if this is Inslee's doing or whomever it is, but again, it's only names, and we'll see what comes out of it. But to me, I don't know of any other sports venue that is actually focused on the issue of climate. And this is what's happening now with the new Kraken, home of the Kraken, come next month or come October when they open their regular season there. What's that all about, man?
Well, first of all, I still wish that they had stuck with one of the original proposed names for our NHL team and would call it the Grunge.
Love that. Love that. That would have been awesome. One big guitar, yes.
The mascot would have been basically an electric guitar player. So right. I thought that was really cool. I would have been, more than willing to take my guitar out on the ice and entertain people. Do some rock and roll to get the show going. And rock and roll and NHL hockey, come on. They go together like, I don't know, like apple pie and mom.
They got to have Eddie Vedder, or Dave Grohl, take center ice first game and they play, right? And that's got to happen, right?
Keep on rocking. Go Kraken.
Awesome. Hey, be safe there, my friend. Thank you for your ability to be flexible as well. I appreciate it always. The best, Mark Taylor-Canfield. Follow him and Watch What You Watch News. And they got new news, too. You can follow him, and you can on Twitter as well. And you can find out more about the expansion of the reach of our good friends at Democracy Watch News. Thanks, Mark. Have yourself a good weekend. All the best. We'll be right back with our good friend Joe Sandberg coming up next here on the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network.
With SRN News, I'm Keith Peters in Washington. President Joe Biden is pledging to Americans still trapped in Afghanistan, "We will get you home." Biden's comments at a White House news conference on Friday come as the U.S. government struggles to ramp up a massive airlift, clearing Americans and other foreigners and vulnerable Afghans, rescuing them from a Taliban takeover of the country. He said the commitment levels extend to Afghans who have assisted the U.S. in the long war. Biden is facing criticism from some at home for the chaotic and often violent scene outside the airport as crowds struggle to reach safety. Flights from Kabul airport had stopped for several hours Friday before resuming. On Wall Street, the Dow up by 224 points, the Nasdaq rose 172, the S&P advanced 35. This is SRN News.
This is the Jeff Santos Show.
33 minutes past the hour. It is the Jeff Santos Show that you are tuned into. We are here every Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 Eastern Time, 12 to 3 Pacific Time. And of course, you can listen to us on tape delay in the great state of Wisconsin, in their capital city of Madison, WI, from 7 to 10 Central Time, there at 92.7 FM in the capital city of Wisconsin. We have made a little switch, as we said. Mark Taylor-Canfield usually in this time slot, and he was very flexible today, and we moved around. So now we talk to our good friend, a sponsor of the Jeff Santos Show. He is the co-founder of Aspiration.com. You can find out more about Aspiration.com by going to Aspiration.com/revolution. And the one and only Joe Sandberg joins us here on the Jeff Santos Show. Joe, thank you for being with us today. Great to have you on this edition of the program. Great to have you, because there's so much to talk about and how domestic and international foreign policy issues kind of connect here. And we've been talking about the issue of corruption quite a bit. We see it at the local level in California. We see it across the country. We see it at the national level. And, remind me of when I saw and heard of all of the corruption level from the prime minister or the president of Afghanistan, who had left like $169 million in the bank, to the bank executives. I think it was Truth Out, or one of the great websites that talked about the corruption in the bank, the cars I owned, the fact that the corruption that is in D.C. that allowed this to go on for 20 years through Democrats and Republicans. It just, to me, personifies what you and I are talking about, what you have been fighting against. And again, as we have a whole week here of talking about Afghanistan, no one is talking about voting rights. No one is talking about the $3.5 trillion, which includes more child care help, which includes free community college, which includes the concerns over in the environment and more green jobs. None of that gets taken care of. It, to me, is so critical that Joe Biden understands how to pivot from the mistakes. They're not things that he can't recover from. But to me, this is really critical because the future of the party, the future of the country is at stake, Joe. And, we're wrapped around, corrupt elements that, that Joe Biden inherited, that his former colleague, Mr. Obama, was involved with. He wanted the surge in Afghanistan, after all, that Trump was involved with. He's the one that started this departure and the fiasco that we've seen. And, of course, this goes back to George W. Bush, who got us into this war, and he could have ended it a few months after, but got us into Iraq. We all know that was a lie. So this issue of corruption is not only the American border, of course, but when Americans allow this to continue, because this wasn't just happening in the last few months. This, to me, is really problematic, and it shows what is at stake now for the American presidency, in fact, for the American government. You can't be associated with these folks. This is where we need to sort of break the line of involvement with corrupt governments. Your thoughts?
Well, corruption also exists at the nexus between the private sector and the public sector, and one of the reasons we end up in these forever wars is because of the profit that exists in war. None less than Republican Dwight Eisenhower warned us in his farewell address of a permanent military-industrial complex, and that may go down as one of the more foresightful things ever said by an American president. It's proven out, and I think we need to address the fact that we have a major portion of our economy that exists and thrives based on there being war. And so follow the money. If people get paid for there being war, what do you think you're going to get?
Exactly. And what you get is corruption up the yin-yang, and it is problematic for the people of this country because, as I said, the issues that are popular with the American people, and even mentioned the minimum wage, which you have been fighting for. If you take a look at all of this, to me, this is a critical time, to talk about the needs of the American people, and they are not in Kabul or Kandahar. They are in places like Kansas City. They are in places that need the help in this country. And frankly, Joe Biden, and I don't know if you want to have in a couple of minutes of advice for the president, but to me, he needs to pivot off of this, say, look, there were mistakes done, but we're not going to leave until, we get every American and every person who worked for America in the embassies the last 20 years, till they're safe, whether in America or another country. And then we're going to focus on this country and the needs of this country, the $3 trillion. Harvey Kay and I just talked about this. These things that, of course, does not include the minimum wage, but should have, but, include the environment, include education, including health care. Going from 65 to 60 possibly, and getting Medicare to include dental and eye and hearing aids. To me, these are all critical things. And we can't get stuck as we did in the 1970s, under the malaise of Jimmy Carter. A very good man, maybe the most honest president we've ever had, ex-president more so. But we got a lot of problems, Joe, and frankly, if we can't get a handle on them now, our future is dismal with a capital D.
Well, the problem is that so-called experts have been wrong about just about everything now for the last 20 years. And you think about the 21st century, it's been a century of the so-called experts being wrong. They missed all the signs of 9/11 about to occur. They got the Iraq War wrong. They got wrong that this idea they had that housing prices would never decline. They got wrong Wall Street regulation. They got wrong the pandemic. They got wrong the risk that Donald Trump was going to win the presidency. Everywhere you look, the so-called experts have misled us and misdirected us. And when are we going to wake up to the realities that the so-called experts really aren't?
Yeah, no, it is the case, and we see a lot of these experts, so-called, on the CNNs and the MSNBCs right now, criticizing Biden and playing into the game of the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about, some 60 years ago. So that's exactly the case, and that needs to change. Let me ask you about this. We'll take some calls at 772-223-2362 for Joe Sandberg to the top of the hour. I really feel that it is important that we learn about the corruption, and if there are Americans involved, which obviously there are, that allowed this government to continue to operate. And make it clear. I mean, this, of course, happened in Vietnam. This is not the first time this is happening. South Vietnam. I mean, Kennedy said to Walter Cronkite, I think in 1963, that, we can only go so far. It's South Vietnam's fight now. We can't go there. And, of course, a lot of people believe that, Kennedy was killed because he didn't want to continue into Vietnam. You could debate that, to forever. But, these are the things. And I think it's important, if Biden wants to be a successful president and move the country away from these corrupt leaders and the corruption that's here in the United States. As you said, there are a lot of private entities that want to make money, and they don't care if the leaders in Afghanistan or wherever are corrupt. They just want the cash. And, it's that old line from Jerry Maguire, show me the money. That's what they really care about.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We have a long way to go, and it's why Bernie Sanders was perspicacious when he said that we need a political revolution. He's right.